In this video, we are going to talk about the importance of language. As you see in this meme, there's a cat, and he says, "Attention, everyone. The captain has a few words for us. Meow, meow, meow." And although you may just think they're 3 words, you need to look at the importance of those 3 words and who may understand those 3 words. A major element in dialect is vernacular and the way we talk. This is the use of language or dialect native to a region or country rather than a literary, cultured, or foreign language. In other words, vernacular helps us communicate on an everyday basis. Example, the way we talk to our friends is different how we talk in an English essay that may be assigned to us by Miss Eisenbaum. So, vernacular includes insanity or any slang words of any kind. So, for example, this can be either in a culture or in the U.S. in general. So, here in the U.S., I know it's common. The English language in general is very common as a way to communicate, but it's likely that what's said in the South has never been even heard in the North. So, for example, there's a difference in how we call pop in the South and North. We either say pop or soda, and that's seen as vernacular. Other things would be like here in the U.S., we say a lot, "I have to bail" when we have to leave a certain situation. And somewhere else, this may have not been interpreted or it may not be understood. Another example is "let's hook up." This can mean several different things depending on who you're with and where you're at. So some have different interpretations of it, and that depends whether they're your friends or there's someone outside of that. Now, jargon. Jargon is completely different from vernacular, although they may be present in the same time. Jargon is a literary term that is defined as the use of specific phrases and words by writers in a particular situation, profession, or trade. So, although the dialect may be common in a certain region, in order to be jargon, it has to be also common in a field and therefore not understood outside of that place. So, an example with this meme here, in order to recognize the man sitting down, you must be in the science field or just have some sort of understood or of who he is and what he did with this sort of telescope. As we all know, he's Galileo, and this is mainly because it has been studied before in elementary or in any other year. Basically, jargon is usually also said to be conveying a hidden meaning or, like I mentioned, understood in that field. And it's very important to know that slang is not jargon just because it is understood by some people. That's more vernacular, while jargon is something that is very formal and also conveys a lot of meaning. So an example of this can be how lawyers and doctors have their own language to communicate and within that field. So if, let's say, a doctor were to say the word blood pressure, an English teacher might not necessarily know what it means, while if an English teacher were to say a certain word like juxtaposition or feminist criticism or psychological criticism, she's gonna know what it means, or he, while the doctor may be confused as well. It is also important to know that the use of jargon in literature shows dexterity of the writer of having knowledge of other spheres. So usually an author would put jargon in a fiction book for the purpose of making its fictional character a real one and having more of a connection to its audience rather than just putting or making it obvious that the character is there for fiction and it just limits the connection that it has. Now, in the following slide, you see two types of text. There's the Formation song by Beyonce, and then there's a summary of the details of the process of meiosis, which is something very important in the science field when trying to study cells and chromosomes and stuff. So, starting with the song Formation, the purpose for this being here is just to basically know the difference between vernacular and jargon in the first place. Beyonce starts by saying that her haters are corny with Illuminati mess, and Illuminati is something that is very popular nowadays just because it's this huge theory that you have to live in the US to know about, because it said that a lot of the artists here are in this organization. And then it goes on by mentioning certain styles like her Givenchy dress, and therefore putting emphasis on how reckless she is and fresh she is because of this dress. That is only important to people of this time, because we know the worthy of it and cannot get out of this context, because if this was said back in the 90s, it wouldn't have any sense, just because it didn't exist and it just wasn't as valued. Um, she then continues to describe her ethnicity or where she comes from. She says, "My daddy Alabama, mama Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, make a Texas Bama." This can be interpreted as a sort of, this can be vernacular right here, just because Texas Bama isn't an official word, but it is very recognized by people who are from the same location. And if you were to say this to someone outside of this country, they'd be, unless they listen to Beyonce, they'd be primarily confused. And the reason for this also being considered some sort of a slang is just because it is in the pop culture today, and if you say it now, it's gonna be recognized. She does the same thing after with the analogy to the Jackson 5, which is a very popular group that was a very popular group in the US, and as well with the "I got hot sauce in my bag" swag. Swag is a word that was created through slang, because back in like about 2 years ago, I would say. And the reason for this was that it was just in the pop culture, and I think Beyonce mentions her hot sauce just because it appeals to the audience that she's singing to. The Formation tour does seem as a way to appreciate African American culture, or the sense of their interest, and therefore appreciating the stereotypical that they like hot sauce. She just mentions it, and therefore that is gonna right away be recognized by people who are also African American, or who people that are aware of the stereotype. Now, all the vernacular that's seen there is actually very different when moving on to the second text. The second text is the describing the details of meiosis, which, like I said, is a process that divides the chromosomes. And what's seen in this text is more of jargon, because before I was able to even learn about meiosis, I was very new to the language being used, such as haploid gametes, or prophase, metaphase, and the yeah, the reproductive cells. It's something that is not right away recognized by someone who hasn't studied it or who hasn't been in the field. And because we have access to it, it affects the way we see it. But if we were to present this to an English teacher, or someone who has no clue of what the meiosis process is, they're gonna be very new to it. So You can tell right off the bat that no slang is primarily used here just because it's very formal, the tone and the structure of it. You see the way that they align the sentences, and it's just very formal, something that, like I said, would not be noticed anywhere else. So an example, the very beginning says this two-phase process divides the chromosomes of a haploid germ cell, generating four haploid gametes. During prophase 1, the nuclear envelope begins to break down and nuclear chromatics starts to condense into individual chromosomes made of two sister chromatids. Now, sister chromatids is very, although we recognize one word, it doesn't, the meaning of it is very completely different. This refers to two alleles that are going to be together, and that wouldn't be noticed by by anyone else. The vocabulary is very complicated, up to the sense that we know this is not fiction at all, and this is very scientific. Now, both texts present an expression of a certain message, and to some extent informative. Some may say that the formation tour and the song is very informative to those who are inside of the culture, basically telling them they need to appreciate it and it's nothing bad. And the meiosis is very informative up to the extent that if you are not from the field, you may learn a lot. And if you are from the field, you need to recognize the process and what really goes into each thing. And yeah.